The polished black sedan, government issue and utterly anonymous, pulled up to the imposing granite gatehouse of Fort Bryton. Inside, a woman sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the two young military police guards who were about to make the gravest mistake of their careers. They saw a 47-year-old woman in a simple, unadorned civilian coat. They did not see the fire forged in the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan. They did not see the years of command, the weight of decisions that had cost lives, the relentless intellect that had rewritten battlefield doctrine. They saw a woman who did not belong, and as she stepped out of the car, one of them, a fresh-faced specialist with more confidence than sense, raised a dismissive hand and uttered the words that would echo through the entire command for years to come. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a blend of boredom and authority, "I'm going to have to stop you right there. You can't come in. Before we witness the storm that is about to be unleashed, if you're new to stories of ultimate redemption and power shifts that will leave you breathless, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because what unfolds next is a masterclass in respect, power, and the cost of underestimation." Her name was Colonel Eleanor Vance, but for the next 72 hours, she was simply Eleanor, a ghost in the machine. This was her design. The Pentagon, in its infinite wisdom, or perhaps its profound stupidity, had appointed her as the new commanding general of Fort Bryton, one of the Army's most prestigious and troubled posts. The previous commander had been relieved in a cloud of scandal contracting, fraud that had eroded morale and tarnished the unit's reputation. The base was rotting from the inside, a place where cronyism festered and discipline had become a suggestion. The Secretary of Defense himself had called her into his cavernous office. "Ellie," he'd said, a familiar address. Belying the gravity of the moment, "Brighton is a snake pit. The reports are sanitized, the numbers are cooked. I need you to go in there, not as a general, but as a set of eyes and ears. I need the truth, the unvarnished, ugly truth, before you take command. See what they show a civilian. See how they treat a woman with no rank on her collar." Eleanor had agreed, not out of ambition, but out of duty. It was a duty that had cost her. It had cost her a marriage, years with her daughter, and the pristine functionality of her left arm, which still ached with a phantom pain where shrapnel had torn through it near Fallujah. The arm was now a masterwork of titanium and carbon fiber, concealed perfectly. Beneath her sleeve, a constant, private reminder of the price of war. The flight from D.C. had been uneventful. She rented a cheap, compact car at the airport, rejecting the sedans and drivers offered to her. She drove the 2 hours to Fort Bryton alone, the flat, winter-browned landscape of the state blurring past her window. She checked into a generic motel just outside the main gate under her maiden name. For 3 days, she became a ghost. She ate at the diners where the junior enlisted gathered, sipping bad coffee and listening to their complaints about poor leadership, about stolen supply funds, about sergeants major who played favorites. She visited the PX, observing the sullen looks of the cashiers, the lack of military bearing in the soldiers shuffling through the aisles. She drove around the perimeter of the vast base, noting the state of the fencing, the alertness of the guards at the lesser-used gates. It was a portrait of an institution in decay, a command asleep at the wheel, and it filled her with a cold, simmering fury. This was not just a base. It was a home to thousands of soldiers and their families. Their trust was being betrayed, and the rot started at the top with the acting commander, a brigadier general named Phil Osborne, a political creature she had known and distrusted for 20 years. Today was the day the ghost would become a general, her official start date. Her uniforms, crisply starched and bearing the 2 stars of a Major General, along with her full-size medals, hung in a garment bag in the trunk of the rented sedan she had now upgraded to. But she was not wearing them. She was wearing a simple, navy blue pantsuit and a white blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a severe but elegant bun. She carried a worn leather briefcase. She looked every inch the capable, perhaps slightly severe, civilian consultant. This was her final test. She would walk into her own headquarters through the front door and see what happened. The 2 MP guards at the gatehouse, specialists Evans and Miller, were the embodiment of the problem she had come to fix. They were bored. Evans, the one who had spoken, was leaning against the bulletproof glass of the booth, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched her approach. Miller stood a few feet behind, looking slightly more apprehensive but saying nothing. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to stop you right there. You can't come in," Evans repeated, his voice louder now, tinged with impatience. Eleanor stopped, her posture ramrod straight, her hands relaxed at her sides. She offered a small, tight smile. "And why is that, specialist?" she asked, her voice calm, low, and carrying an unexpected edge of steel. Evans blinked, thrown by her tone. He was used to civilians being either nervous or belligerent. This calm authority was new. "This is a restricted military installation, ma'am. You need a Department of Defense ID or a pre-cleared visitor's pass." "I have an appointment," Eleanor said, not moving. "With General Osborne's office." Evans scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "I'm sure you do, ma'am. Everyone has an appointment. You need to go to the Visitor Control Center, about a mile down the road on the left. They'll get you sorted out." Maybe. The dismissive maybe was the final straw. It was the verbal shrug of an institution that did not care. Eleanor's eyes, a cool, assessing grey, did not waver from his. "Specialist, I suggest you call the headquarters building. Ask for General Osborne's aide-de-camp. Tell him Eleanor Vance is here." Evans laughed now, a genuine, derisive laugh. "Lady, I'm not calling the General's aide for a walk-in. The VCC is that way. Now, I need you to move your vehicle. You're blocking the lane." He gestured vaguely toward her rented sedan. Inside, Eleanor felt the familiar cold focus of a combat drop descend upon her. The sounds of the bass, the distant hum of generators, the rumble of a truck faded away. This boy, this child playing soldier, was the first brick in the wall she was going to tear down. She took a single step forward. It was not a large step, but it was decisive, and it carried her into his personal space. Evans instinctively took a half step back, his smirk faltering. "You will pick up that phone," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "You will call the command suite, and you will tell Captain John Riggs that his new commanding general is waiting at the gate and is being denied entry by one of his own soldiers. Is that understood?" The world seemed to freeze. Evans's face went through a rapid series of transformations. Confusion, disbelief, a dawning, horrifying realization. The color drained from his cheeks. Miller, behind him, audibly gasped. You're, Evans stammered. "The phone," Specialist Eleanor repeated, her voice still quiet, but now each word was like the crack of a whip. "Now." Evans fumbled for the handset inside the gatehouse, his hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. He punched in the number for headquarters, his eyes locked on Eleanor, who had not moved, her gaze pinning him to the spot like a butterfly in a display case. The conversation on the other end was short, frantic. Evans's side of it was mostly yes, sir, and no, sir, and immediately, sir. He hung up the phone, his body rigid with terror. He looked like he was going to be sick. "Ma'am, General, I didn't know. I'm so sorry," he choked out. Eleanor said nothing. She simply stood there, a statue of judgment, letting the silence and the weight of his error crush him. In the distance, the sound of a siren began to wail, growing rapidly closer. A black SUV with a flashing blue light screeched to a halt just inside the gate. The passenger door flew open, and a harried-looking Captain, John Riggs, leaped out. His face was pale. His uniform jacket was unbuttoned. He sprinted to the gate, skidding to a stop before Eleanor and snapping a salute so sharp it looked like it could cut the air. "General Vance. Captain Riggs, your aide-de-camp, ma'am. On behalf of Fort Bryton, I offer my most profound apologies," he blurted out, his chest heaving. Eleanor slowly, deliberately returned the salute. Her eyes finally left Evans and settled on Riggs. "Captain," she said, her voice now carrying clearly in the morning air, "it seems there is a failure of discipline and protocol at the very first point of contact for this installation. See that these two soldiers are relieved of duty immediately. They will report to the MP station and await my personal attention." "Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, ma'am," Riggs barked. He turned to the two petrified guards. "You heard the General. Move." As they scrambled away, their world in ruins, Eleanor finally walked through the gate. She did not look back. The fortress, unaware, was now breached. The drive to the headquarters building was a silent, tense affair. Riggs, driving the SUV, attempted to stammer out more apologies and explanations, but Eleanor cut him off with a single raised hand. The situation is noted, Captain. My office is ready, I presume. Yes, ma'am. Fully prepared. General Osborne is awaiting your arrival. She could hear the dread in his voice. The news would have spread through the command group like wildfire. The new CG had been stopped at the gate. The new CG was not happy. The building, a bland 1970s-era concrete block, loomed before them. As the SUV pulled into the reserved spot marked Commanding General, she saw a small, anxious group assembled at the entrance. At its center was Brigadier General Phil Osborne, his face a mask of strained joviality over a foundation of pure panic. As she stepped out of the vehicle, he stepped forward, saluting. "Ellie. My God, what an unbelievable mess. I am so terribly sorry. Those idiots at the gate will be scrubbing latrines with toothbrushes for the next decade. I can promise you that." Eleanor returned the salute, her expression unreadable. "General Osborne, the failure of those idiots, as you call them, is a reflection of the leadership that trains and supervises them. It is a systemic failure, not an individual one. Shall we proceed to my office? I believe you have a briefing prepared on the state of the post." Osborne's smile tightened. The friendly Ellie had been met with a formal General Osborne. The message was received. The war for the soul of Fort Bryton had begun, and the first shot had been fired not in a conference room but at a gatehouse. The walk through the corridors was a study in power dynamics. Soldiers and civilian employees froze in their tracks, saluting or staring with wide eyes. The rumor mill had done its work. They all knew. They knew the woman in the simple blue suit, walking with an unnerving predatory. Grace was the one who had just dismantled 2 MPs with a look. She was the storm they had been warned about. Her office was large, corner, with a view of the parade field. It was clean, impersonal, the desk bare except for a phone and a single pen. Osborne and his staff filed in, taking seats around the small conference table. The briefing began. It was a masterpiece of obfuscation. Slides filled with green graphs and upward trending arrows. Reports on training readiness, equipment maintenance, and morale that painted a picture of a base rebounding beautifully from its recent troubles. Osborne spoke with a smooth, practiced confidence, occasionally glancing at Eleanor for a reaction. He got none. She sat, perfectly still, her hands folded on the table, her eyes missing nothing. She let him talk. She let him bury himself in his own fiction. When he finally finished, a smugness creeping back into his demeanor, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to the new general. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, the movement causing everyone to instinctively lean in with her. "General Osborne," she began, her voice deceptively soft. "That was a fascinating presentation. Truly a work of creative fiction." The air went out of the room. Osborne's face went slack. "Ma'am," he managed. "Let's start with slide 4, Eleanor continued, picking up the remote. "You report 98% vehicle readiness for the 2nd Brigade Combat Team. Yet, 3 days ago, I sat in a diner and listened to sergeants from that very brigade complain that half their trucks are dead-lined for lack of parts that were supposedly ordered and paid for 6 months ago. Would you like the names of those sergeants?" She didn't wait for an answer. Slide 7, morale. "You show a 20% improvement in survey results. I have spent the last 72 hours on and around this post. I have seen the state of the barracks, with their peeling paint and broken plumbing. I have spoken to spouses at the commissary who are terrified to spend money, because their family's supplemental income has mysteriously vanished. I have seen the dead-eyed look of soldiers who have lost faith in their chain of command." She paused, letting the accusations hang in the air like smoke. "This post is not recovering, General Osborne. It is dying, and your briefing is not a report. It is a eulogy delivered by the man who helped kill it." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the ragged intake of Osborne's breath. He sputtered, "General Vance, with all due respect, you have been here for 5 minutes. You cannot base your assessment on the gossip of disgruntled junior enlisted and a clandestine sightseeing tour." Eleanor stood up. The movement was fluid and powerful. She walked to the window, looking out at the parade field. "You are correct about one thing, General. I have been here for 5 minutes, but in those 5 minutes, I have seen more truth than you have reported in the last 5 months." She turned to face him, and now her voice was no longer soft. It was the voice that had commanded battalions under artillery fire, Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as Deputy Commanding General. You will report to your quarters and consider yourself under house arrest, pending the outcome of a full investigation by the Army Inspector General. Your access to all classified and sensitive material is revoked. Captain Riggs. Riggs jumped to his feet. Ma'am, escort General Osborne from the building, and then assemble the entire command staff, all battalion commanders and their sergeants major in the main auditorium in 1 hour. I will address them personally. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Osborne was led away, a broken man, his career ending not with a bang, but with a quiet, shameful walk past his stunned subordinates. The news ripped through Fort Bryton at the speed of light. Text messages blew up phones. The new general wasn't just tough. She was a force of nature. She had fired the acting CG within an hour of setting foot in her office. She had gone rogue before even taking command. In her office, alone for the first time, Eleanor finally allowed herself to change. She unlocked her briefcase and removed her stars, pinning them to the epaulets of the uniform jacket she took from the garment bag. She affixed her name tape, her combat patches, and her rows of medals. Each ribbon told a story: valor, service, sacrifice. Looking in the small mirror in her private bathroom, she saw the transformation was complete. The civilian was gone. The general had arrived. The auditorium was packed, buzzing with a nervous, electric energy. Every senior leader on the post was there, over 200 of the Army's best and brightest, and they were scared. When Eleanor walked onto the stage alone, the room fell silent so fast it was jarring. She did not go to the podium. She walked to the center of the stage, her boot heels clicking on the wooden floor, a sound that echoed in the hush. She stood there, letting them look at her, letting them see the medals, the stars, the sharp creases in her uniform, letting them see the woman who had humiliated Phil Osborne. Her eyes scanned the crowd, meeting the gaze of one commander, then another. "I am Major General Eleanor Vance," she began, her voice amplified but needing no microphone to project its authority. "And as of 0900 this morning, I am your commanding officer. Some of you have already met me. Most of you have only heard stories. Let me be clear about what those stories mean. The party is over. The lies are over. The corruption, the cronyism, the neglect of our soldiers and their families, it ends today. Right now." She took a step forward, her hands clasped behind her back. "I did not come here to preside over the decline of this great post. I came here to rebuild it. And rebuilding requires a solid foundation. That foundation is trust. Trust between soldiers, trust between leaders and the laddie, and trust that the person next to you will do their duty. What happened at the gate this morning was a failure of trust. It was a failure of discipline. It was a symptom of the disease that has infected this command." She told them then about the 3 days. She named the diners. She described the barracks. She quoted verbatim the complaints of the junior enlisted. The audience squirmed. She knew things she had no right to know. She had seen things they had tried to hide. "So, here is my first order. My only order for today. There will be no more briefings with pretty slides. There will be truth. I want every commander in this room to go back to your units. I want you to walk through your motor pools. I want you to eat in your chow halls. I want you to sleep one night in your barracks. And then, tomorrow at 0700, you will come to my office, and you will tell me what is broken, and you will tell me how you are going to fix it. And if you cannot fix it, you will tell me what you need from me to get it done. I will not tolerate those who hide the truth, but I will champion those who have the courage to speak it, no matter how ugly it is." She paused, letting the directive sink in. This post will become the example for the entire United States Army. It will be a place where discipline is sharp, where training is realistic, where our equipment works, and where our soldiers and their families are treated with the respect they have earned. We have a long, hard road ahead of us. The work will be brutal. The days will be long. But I would not ask you to walk one step of that road that I am not willing to run myself. I have bled for this army. I have watched good men and women die for it. I will not stand by and watch it be dishonored by laziness, greed, or incompetence. That is all. Dismissed. She did not wait for applause. She turned and walked off the stage, leaving a stunned and silent room in her wake. It was not a speech. It was a declaration of war. And they were all now soldiers in her army, whether they wanted to be or not. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Eleanor worked 18-hour days. She held true to her word. Commanders came to her, at first timidly, then with growing confidence, and presented their problems. She listened. She allocated funds from emergency accounts they didn't know existed. She fired a battalion commander who tried to bluff his way through a report on his unit's readiness. She promoted a sharp, young sergeant first class to platoon sergeant on the spot after finding him expertly mentoring his troops in the motor pool. The story of the gate incident had become legend, but it was now coupled with a new narrative. General Vance gets things done. She visited the motor pools at 4 a.m. She showed up unannounced at the rifle ranges. She ate every meal in a different dining facility, sitting with privates and specialists, listening to their stories. The base, which had been gripped by fear, began to stir with something it hadn't felt in years: hope. But she had not forgotten the two young men who had started it all. A week after her arrival, she summoned Specialists Evans and Miller to her office. They marched in, rigid with terror, their uniforms perfect, their salutes crisp. They expected to be court-martialed, to be stripped of their rank, to be thrown out of the army in disgrace. Eleanor let them stand at attention for a full minute, her eyes boring into them. "At ease," she finally said. They relaxed their posture, but not their fear. "Do you know why you are here?" she asked. Evans, his voice trembling, answered, "To receive our punishment, ma'am." "Punishment?" Eleanor repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You have already been punished. You were publicly humiliated, relieved of your prestigious gate duty, and have spent the last week in a state of abject terror. Is that not correct?" "Yes, ma'am," they both mumbled. "Good," Eleanor said. "Then the punishment portion of this affair is concluded." They looked up, confused. "Your failure was my opportunity," she explained. "It exposed a critical flaw in this command. For that, in a twisted way, I should thank you. But thanks are not what you need. You need to learn. You displayed a profound lack of judgment, professionalism, and respect. But I have read your files. Evans, you scored in the top 5% on your GT exam. Miller, you were your advanced individual training class leader. You are not stupid. You were poorly led." She stood up and came around the desk. "So here is what is going to happen. You will not be returning to the MP company. You are being reassigned, effective immediately. You are both on my personal staff as assistant logistics clerks. You will work directly for Sergeant Major O'Malley. You will see, from this office, how a command is supposed to function. You will process every supply request, every work order, every complaint that comes from the units on this post. You will see the direct result of the negligence you were a part of, and you will be part of the solution that fixes it. You will work harder than you have ever worked in your lives. You will be held to a higher standard than anyone else on this post. Do you understand?" They were stunned. It wasn't a discharge, it was a second chance. A brutally difficult one. "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison, a new, fierce determination in their voices. Dismissed as they left, she knew she had not just disciplined them. She had potentially reclaimed two soldiers who would now be fanatically loyal to her and her mission. The transformation of Fort Bryton did not happen overnight, but it happened. Over the next 6 months, the base was unrecognizable. The barracks were repainted and repaired, the motor pools hummed with activity, and vehicle readiness rates skyrocketed. From the fictional 98% to a genuine 92%. Morale, measured by new, anonymous surveys that Eleanor herself designed, improved dramatically. The fear had been replaced by pride. She became a legend, not just for the gate incident, but for her unwavering commitment. She was tough, but she was fair. She was demanding, but she provided the tools to meet her demands. She was seen as their general, their protector, their champion. The investigation she initiated led to the court-martial of Phil Osborne and several of his cronies, exposing a web of kickbacks and fraud that reached deep into the post's contracting office. The cleansing was total. The culmination of her efforts was the post's annual deployment ceremony. The 2nd Brigade was heading to Kuwait, a routine rotation. But this time, it felt different. The families on the field were not just anxious. They were confident. The soldiers were not just prepared. They were sharp, disciplined, and motivated. Eleanor stood on the podium, addressing the thousands of soldiers arrayed before her in perfect formation, and the thousands of family members in the bleachers. She spoke of duty, honor, and the sacred trust they all shared. She was no longer the outsider. She was the heart of this community. As the buses began to load, she stepped down from the podium and walked among the soldiers, shaking hands, clapping shoulders, sharing a few words with each one. She saw Specialists Evans and Miller, now promoted to corporals, helping to coordinate the movement. They saw her, snapped to attention, and saluted. Their salutes were no longer born of fear, but of deep, abiding respect. She returned the salute, a small, almost imperceptible nod of approval passing between them. The boys who had tried to stop her at the gate were now among her most dedicated soldiers. Later that evening, alone in her quarters, the adrenaline of the day finally fading, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She opened a locked drawer in her desk and took out a single photograph. It was of a younger her, in uniform, standing with a laughing little girl, her daughter, Sarah, now a young woman she spoke to every week but saw all too rarely. This was the cost. The long hours, the relentless pressure, the weight of command. It was a loneliness that was hard to describe. The triumph of the day, the respect of her soldiers, it was all real. But so was the empty space in her life where family should be. She had chosen this path, and she would walk it to the end, but she now understood that true leadership wasn't about power. It was about sacrifice. She had sacrificed her anonymity, her comfort, and a part of her personal life to give these soldiers and their families a better one. And as she looked out her window at the lights of the base twinkling in the gathering dusk, a place she had dragged back from the brink, she knew, with a profound and emotional certainty, that it had been worth it. The story that began with a slammed gate had ended with an open road, a road her soldiers now walked with their heads held high, ready for whatever came next, because they knew their general had their back. And from which part of the country are you watching this video? Let me know in the comments below.